Greetings and bienvenue. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Today I want to tell you guys about the Light Man. I know it sounds made up and you can believe me or not, whatever. But what I say now did happen and scared me to my core. I really mean this. It is not a made-up story to scare people. I really experienced this when I was a kid. Be around 10 or 11, be living in Bosnia and Herzegovina, or BIH for short. I grew up in a small village. One night me and bro are chilling. He is 1 year older. We are chilling with some vidya. I remember it was that Garbage Plants vs. Zombies game that was released on Facebook. It was on an old-ass laptop. After some time I get mad because he doesn't want to let me play as well. We got into an argument where I stormed out of my uncle's house. We lived there because we were poor, and my uncle was a drunk 24/7 loner. Had these huge stairs that came up to the main door of the house, and my bike was below them. Grab a bike in anger at night and just go biking through the village. As I bike, like 5 minutes later, I see a light far away. Pic sorta related. It is a pic from my village, but not the spot where it happened. The light was around the same distance. Confused now. Think to myself as a kid, it's too late for the dude to be out. Small village, so Ike who it is. For some reason, just stand there and watch the light like a dumbass. Weird for the guy to be out, must have heard a noise. Or is checking that his chickens are okay. As the light goes its normal way, all of a sudden, from that distance, it spins to look at me. Kinda shocked. After it spots me, it just starts running down the mountain towards me. I wet myself out of fear and like a dumbass, get off my bike to turn it 180 degrees to bike it back home. As I do so, just when I start to give it all I have, he is behind me. How the F? I come home, throw the bike on the grass, and just run in. Bro is confused, and I ramble about the light following me. I go into the kitchen to grab a knife to defend myself. As the first floor of the house is built, the kitchen is connected with a hallway and the living room. Can see the main door of the house I came through when you walk to the kitchen. As I go and grab the knife, I just see a light on the door. I scream at my brother that the light is there and run to my bro. Dude like a Chad gets up and tells me to go check it out. We peek outside the door. All of that took like 1 minute tops. We peek and he checks the stairs I came from as I look up the hill from my uncle's place. There's a field behind his house for planting stuff. After that, a small road, then a large forest. Imagine the distance like in the pic, but a little shorter. Last thing I see is the light near my grandmother's farm, and as if it knew, turns around towards me and goes into the forest. To this day, I don't know WTF happened or what it was. Never spoke about it, but if I go back to visit my old folks, I could take those pics for a better visual clarity.
Sounds like a crazy story, but I'm confused on the details. What was the shape of this light? It came to your door but then went away. Was it a person or just a ball of light?
Basically, it looked as if someone held a flashlight, but I never saw who it was that held it or even what it was. It just chased me and I never saw a body or anything. And to answer the other question, yeah, it was there. Because when I was grabbing the knife I had seen it, I started to scream and ran to my bro. In that small window of time, it crossed a huge distance, and then the story ends pretty much. My bad for the story, by the way, since I wrote this whilst being at work.
So it sort of looked like a person behind the light holding it. Was there anything else of note you can remember? Did it make a sound as it rushed at you? Was there a scent in the air of any kind that seemed out of place?
That's the thing, the time it was behind me and the time it was at the door, I never saw as if anyone was there. I guess the best way to explain it would be if a ghost held it, but when he was at the door I just saw that light. Like someone was there but wasn't at the same time. I know it's a poor explanation, and to answer the other two questions, TBF, now you mention them, no. There was no sound or a scent. I'm sorry, I really wish I can add more to that story or explain it better.
No need to apologize, OP. It sounds like it was a deeply startling experience, so there's no wonder you had little time to take in more details. Unfortunately, I have no idea what it could be either. If you still have relatives in the area, it might be worth asking them about local legends.
To be fair, I do have my uncle and grandparents, but my uncle is a mystery and is an old school guy who drinks every day. The rest of the family that lives in that village are not good people, but there are only like 30 people that live there now. Who knows, maybe I can ask my uncle when I visit next time I am there. To add another quick story to this one, a couple months back before the story, we had a little house built in by the kids there. It was me, my bro, and 5 other kids, but we were the only group of kids in that village, so it was chill and we did kids stuff like hide and seek, football, etc. Anyways, we had built a small house there. Think like a treehouse, but a bit more shoddy built. It was pretty cozy and chill. One day we were playing cops and robbers, and the rules were the whole village was the play area, and the woods were forbidden. So 2 kids who were robbers were hiding in a small shed that was near those woods. When they heard some noise coming from those woods and checked it out, there was someone destroying the house, so they chased after it. Sadly, one of the kids fell since it had rained a couple hours before, and so the other one helped him instead of chasing the mystery person. The problem in this story is that the mystery person ran deeper into the woods where no other houses were, like 0, just more woods. And the spoopy part would be that nobody had fit the description of this mystery dude because they only got the info that it was wearing a hoodie with jeans. So yeah, I guess something is in those woods. Apologies for the typing since I'm on mobile.
Born June 16, 1986. In Novigrad, Bosnia, 700-year-old Roman settlement originally called Castrum Novum. On the day I was born, there was a shortage of food. Farms had no wheat. Mills had no flour, bakers had no bread. For 6 years, nothing has happened. When I turned 6, war came into our town. A lot of people were slaughtered. Leave for Croatia. Live like normal for a year. 7th birthday. Sitting in the basement of an old house playing with another kid, we're alone. Other kid gets up and leaves the room. Turns out light. See a giant dark figure in the corner of the room. Run for the door. The figure grabs my leg. Barely crawl out of the room. Almost entirely paralyzed with fear. Start seeing the shape of a cat walking towards me inside dim rooms during the day. Every year from a couple days from my birthday until a couple days after everyone is hungry. Problem with a bank, they can't get money. There is very little food in the house. Financial problems which prevent using money on anything but. Always clears up right after my birthday. Last week. Be 27th birthday, fire in my workplace, no bread. No bread in the stores nearby for some reason either. Most of the fresh food in my workplace is out. They say it will take months to fix fire damage. 7 days after my birthday, the workplace is 100% in shape due to the increased effort of repair crews. Start randomly noticing gnats finding their way in my bedroom. Clean the bedroom daily, shower daily. It's a gluttony demon, right? And it's getting stronger, right?
My friend lives in a village in Bosnia called Rekavice, and he told me these creepy stories circulating there. The most popular one is the white girl in the woods. The village is surrounded by forests and is on a hillside, and there are really creepy sightings of this alleged white woman. The story goes that random people go there and see this pale white woman just standing still, staring into one dot, but never at you. My friend said that his friend's dad actually encountered this creature. He was going to chop some firewood, I think, and came across her. She was apparently all in white and staring at the forest, still and quiet. He came closer and closer, up to the point where he was around 2 meters from her, asked her who she was and what she was doing, but no response. He eventually started yelling, but alas, no answer. Then he picked up a rock, threw it beside her, and she didn't respond. Then he threw another one and still no reaction. After that, he picked up a rock and threw it at her, and it just bounced off her head as if she were made of stone. Then he walked towards her to grab her, and she vanished. It's really creepy because I know his son, and he told me the exact same thing my friend did. I don't really believe that, but it did give me some chills. But this is where it gets weirder. You see, my nation is very religious, and we have a saint for every day on the calendar. Most are unimportant to anyone. Others are worshipped and sometimes feared. Anyone that knows anything about Serbian culture should know about that. So anyway, at one day in August, like the 2nd or 3rd, I'm not sure, there's a saint called Blessed Mary, Blaga Maria, which is the day of Mary Magdalene. And on that day, you're not supposed to do anything, like wash your clothes or take a bath and such. She was having guests over. She told them to wait a bit to get the laundry into the washing machine. One of the guests told her that it was Blessed Mary Day and that she shouldn't do that. She disregarded him and did it anyways. Later that night, she was preparing pancakes, I think, and the hot oil from the frying pan spilled on her forearm, causing really bad burns to form. She experienced extreme pain for a few weeks after that, waking up in the middle of the night, screaming in pain. A blister formed on her forearm. Now there is a scar in the shape of a saint. It was in the shape of a woman in a dress, with arms sticking out on the side and a saint's veil around the area of the head, and I've actually seen it. Now she doesn't do anything on that day. She always excuses herself from work, doesn't do any chores, just lies in bed and watches TV or something. The creepy part is that she was born in that village, and it may be somehow connected to the woman that is reported seen in that area. I myself find this really weird, but I don't really believe in it, but it's worth thinking about it.
In the Balkan Mountains in Bosnia, where the climate can be harsh, the living conditions are austere, and dangers like wolves, bears, or bandits are abound. It is believed that the safest way for a soul to enter heaven is a pious, honest, and virtuous life of hard work and good deeds. The way to heaven is a perilous thought. One can fall to vice and sin, or even after death, when on the way to heaven a soul can be snatched by demons and dragged to hell. Some are just not patient and don't want to wait a lifetime. So the question about a shortcut to heaven has been asked more than once. Ending a life prematurely by one's own hand does not fulfill the purpose, for it is a sin and will lead the soul to eternal damnation. Another way is the ritual of Kulin the Elder. About 1,000 years ago, Kulin the Elder and his 8 disciples performed a ritual to send their souls to heaven while the body is still on earth. Even though questionable, it is technically not a sin, but the result might be because, well, what is a human body without a soul? Reports are scarce. Some say that is how vampires are created. Others picture the resulting creatures as different kinds of undead and human abominations. The last writings about that ritual was found in a monastery and was from the early 16th century when Bosnia was part of the Ottoman Empire. They report about the appearance of those soulless abominations. They had to be dressed in gray and brown cloth with the faces covered so they could be recognized from afar and be avoided. Their facial expressions were said to be unhuman, like grimaces frozen in eternal terror, and one should avoid making eye contact. The eyes are windows to the soul, but if the bearer has none, the looker stares at an abyss, and this will corrupt and drain his soul. Some could be put to menial labor on the fields, others had to be hidden away. Usually the relatives were responsible for feeding them. They could not be killed because even without a soul, they were still considered human, and their killing would be deemed murder. And under no circumstances were they to be abandoned in the woods or the mountains, for obvious reasons. They would descend onto settlements and stare right at unsuspecting people's eyes, which would not only terrify them, but also cause damage to their psyche. One of the reports says that one such creature was led around the village on a leash by a group of monks every dead Sunday, as some kind of cautionary tale to scare the villagers into obedience. I once asked a Bosnian friend to ask around his people to see if there is any knowledge about that stuff. He reported back that his grandmother slapped him across the face and told him she will not suffer that kind of talk in her house, ever.
I am an American currently living with my Bosnian wife in Sarajevo. Not long ago, we became interested in mountaineering, and on February 9th, 2008, we joined about 7 others for a hike up a nearby mountain. We took a train to a village at the base of the mountain and from there went by foot. Besides my wife, I knew only one other girl in the group, but got to know everyone else as we hiked about 7 kilometers to our destination, a mountain lodge set in an isolated area. There were no roads to this place, and the quickest way up was a 4-hour trek through the woodlands along a steep, winding, snow-covered path. The trip up was rough, and soon we left the damp, green fields of the village below and found ourselves struggling through snow that sometimes came to our hips. I was amazed at how beautiful everything was, but happy when we turned a bend, went up yet another slope, and finally caught sight of the building we would spend the night in. The place was nice considering we were roughing it for the weekend. We entered into a spacious room with tables and benches situated along the walls. In one corner we warmed our clothes and boots by a hot wood-burning stove, while warming ourselves with Bosnian coffee, hot tea, and good conversation. A short hallway just off of the main room led to the bathroom, which had 3 sinks and 4 stalls with doors. Next to the bathroom, a set of stairs led up to the rooms we would be sleeping in. We found out there was no electricity for the place, so we would be using flashlights and lanterns for the evening. Besides the group I came with, there were 2 girls who ran the kitchen, 2 men who did maintenance on all the nearby lodges who happened to be there for the night, and a couple who came in right after us. Although we came at separate times, everyone got along well, and for that night, became one group. Below the lodge at a distance was a small village that was deserted at the time, only used for the summer months. There were about 7 snow-covered buildings that consisted of houses and barns. An empty swing in one yard swayed back and forth with the force of the driving wind. A storm was coming, so some of the others decided to hike around a bit, explore the village below, or take photos before it was too late to do so. With everyone gone, I decided to take the bags my wife and I brought with us to our room and have a look upstairs. All our rooms were situated at the top of the stairs. To the right of our rooms was a hallway, the length of the lodge, with about 6 doors on each side of it. I dumped off the bags, went down the hall, and tried to look out the frost-covered window at the far end. While looking out the window, I heard someone whisper, "Ne znam, I do not know," and "Uskoro, ne sada, soon, not now." They repeated this several times, but I could not find the source of the voice. I went back down, not feeling weird, but embarrassed that I had most likely stumbled along a few guests having a private conversation. I was surprised, though, to find everyone in the main room talking or just outside the window, having returned to the site and taking more photos. Soon the storm took full effect and everyone came for the night. Although it was getting dark fast, there was still enough light out to see, so I spent time at the window enjoying the view. As I looked down at the village, I could make out a man standing near one of the houses. He was completely still for some time, then walked about 20 yards and stopped. I could barely make out the sight of him placing his hands on his hips and turning his waist as if looking around. After talking with my wife for a few minutes, I returned to the window and the man was in his original position. Suddenly he turned toward the lodge, seemed to look up and waved. For some reason I pulled back from the window and hid behind the wall. Looking back out, I saw that the man had faced away from us again and stood motionless, seemingly watching the snow beat upon the walls of the empty houses around him. I told our guide about our unannounced visitor, and soon everyone was looking out the window down at the tiny shape among the houses. The kitchen girls resided in the lodge and said none of the villagers ever came back until spring, and besides those of us already in the building, no one had called in earlier to announce they were coming, as it was customary to do. It seemed there was no emergency, so rather than hike down and see if he was okay, our guide suggested we just leave the door unlocked for a while in case he came up for shelter. I looked down one more time and there he was, standing in the same spot he had been in for about an hour. Eventually, the storm came in force and outside became pitch black. No lights could be seen below and no one ever came to the door. About an hour after everyone was settled in the main room eating and talking, we heard stomping coming from upstairs. It was in the area our rooms were in. Everyone was accounted for, so one of the maintenance men went up, sporting a headband with a light attached to it, and checked everything out. He found nothing. One of the men had lit a dim lamp and everyone gathered at 2 of the tables near it. A few people were drinking Sarajevo beer and someone had brought a bottle of domestic brandy to warm us up. I had neither of these spirits but was getting comfortable and drowsy nonetheless, so decided to go to the bathroom before going upstairs to bed. In the bathroom, I navigated my way to one of the stalls and went in. The toilets were of the European type, basins built into the floor with a hole in the middle. Even with my small flashlight, I could hardly see, so, hoping my aim was true, I went at it. Just after finishing, a glow of light appeared in the cracks around the door. I flushed and went out to find a lady standing at the door holding a candle. I was caught still zipping up, so was a bit embarrassed, but said hello. She just smiled, nodded, and placed the candle on the glass shelf above the middle sink. I left her doing that and sat down with my wife again. About 5 minutes later, it dawned on me that I had never seen her before. She was not one of us. My wife thought I was mistaken, that it was probably one of the kitchen girls, but I know it was not. This lady was older, and after that incident in the bathroom, I never saw her again. I never said anything to the others, but I did hear them wondering who it was that was kind enough and smart enough to have put a candle in the bathroom. No one claimed to have done it. Soon my wife and I were in our frigid room wrapped in sleeping bags, trying to sleep. While she nodded off, I did a crossword puzzle by the light of my flashlight and listened as the conversation downstairs got more and more animated. It seemed one of the girls had had her fair share of the brandy. I dozed off and awoke when I heard everyone coming up the creaky stairs to bed. I fell back asleep only to wake up later having to go down to the bathroom again. It was freezing and I quickly did my duty and hurried up to my room and into my sleeping bag. Before I could drift off into slumber, a light outside our door got my attention. The top of the door consisted of a pane of hazy glass, and through this I saw the blur of a bright light come from around the hallway, pass my door, and then go down the stairs. A few minutes later it came back up and turned into the hallway again. I thought little of this until later when I realized 4 things were wrong with this scene. First, this light was much brighter than the lamp or any other lights used that night. Second, it was gliding, rather than moving as if held by a hand. Third, it moved much too fast to be someone who had just gotten up for a quick trip downstairs and was unfamiliar with the place. And fourth, there was no noise whatsoever, and those steps were very noisy. Tired from our trip up, I finally fell back asleep and woke up much too early. We went down and had coffee with the others and soon were preparing for our trip down. Another storm was coming, so we had to cancel any other plans. I never mentioned what I saw and heard to the others, but as we made our way back down the mountain, our guide said that a few strange things had happened to him years ago at that same lodge, although he never did elaborate as to what they were. Just over a hill from where we had spent the night, he pointed toward some woods and said they were known to be haunted. This could easily have been a small story to add some flair to the trip, but he told us with a straight face, and I did notice that although our route would have been much easier going through those woods, it took a wide arc around them. Regardless of whether those woods are truly haunted, I do know there is something strange about the lodge. Even my wife, who is completely uninterested in those types of things, admitted that she felt strange there and could not explain away many of the things I experienced. The lodge did not scare me much, although it should have since it was kind of creepy. I was just confused as to what was going on and was trying to enjoy the trip.
I was deployed to Bosnia and Herzegovina in March of 1999. We landed March 7th, to be exact, at Eagle Base near Tuzla, after a long 17 or 18-hour flight from Fort Hood, Texas. On March 24th, 17 days later, NATO began bombing Serbia for its actions in Kosovo. Before coming to Bosnia, I only knew about the war from watching Channel 1 in the 6th grade homeroom before the beginning of the school day, and from the little bit of history we learned in our preparation for our deployment. Our mission was to keep the warring factions from basically wiping each other off the face of the earth. We were stationed at Camp Comanche, roughly a kilometer or two from Eagle Base, which was the headquarters of the Multinational Division North and the 1st Cavalry Division in Bosnia. Our base camp was the headquarters of the 4th Brigade of the 1st Cavalry Division, which was an aviation brigade with numerous helicopters of 3 main types: Blackhawks, Apache Longbow, and Kiowa Warrior. We were tasked with base security and presence patrols in and around the town of Zivanich, which nestled right up to our perimeter. We had 16 guard towers and 2 gates, front and back, the back leading to the road that connected our camp and Eagle Base. For the main bulk of our deployment, I was assigned to our base quick reaction force. I had also manned the front and back gates, mostly the front, and at one time for about a week, I was assigned to a tower because I was told that I was getting too close to the children who frequented the front gate. I had used our general-purpose first aid kit to mend a wound on one of the gypsy kids who always came to the gate asking for MREs. So because I couldn't stand to see this little boy with blisters and sores all over his feet, I was stuck in a tower helping him. Whatever, I thought we were there to help. Anyways, Bosnia was, in my opinion, a very beautiful country from the air, but very spooky down on ground level. The place just had an air of foreboding around it. Ominous, really. I'm sure the stigma of the war and the amount of people who were killed there added to that feeling. I've taken an interest in learning more about the war in recent times, and having done this, came to terms with the misery and death that preceded our arrival. I read a story in the Talon, which was the Task Force Eagle newspaper, so to speak, about a unit from 1/5 Cav that had an observation post on a hilltop or mountaintop. I can't remember which, that used to be an artillery OP during the war. The unit told of unexplained happenings around their perimeter and tales of apparitions around their post. Supposedly during the war, the OP was destroyed and is haunted by the commander and his brother from what I can remember. Having only one experience to my name at Fort Hood that I recently shared with this site, I found the article interesting but still remained a skeptic nonetheless. One night while working the midnight to noon shift on QRF, we received a call of someone possibly trying to gain entrance to the camp through the concertina wire fence near Tower 6 by the flight line. This wasn't too uncommon, as we had teenagers actually cut through the wire and actually steal some fire extinguishers under the noses of some very lax and irresponsible guards in the towers. Still, we loaded the 50 cal M2 machine guns on our 2 up-armored Humvees and started to make our way out there. Before we pulled out, we were told to make our way to the connexes that were positioned near the back perimeter road. This was on our way, so we acknowledged and headed to the location. The commander of the guard and a few intel officers and the base commander and sergeant major were there as well. When I saw all the higher-ups there, I thought maybe something was actually going down, and I shared in the excitement of my quick reaction force buddies that we might get to shoot something. Being a young 19-year-old specialist E4, and joining the Army for the possibility of that happening, you tend to get a little pumped up. The 312th Military Intelligence Battalion had their Night Stalker parked behind the connexes. This was a Humvee with a long boom that had a FLAR camera mounted on top, forward-looking infrared camera. Being in charge of the second vehicle in our group, myself and the corporal in charge of the first truck reported to the commander of the guard, one of first lieutenants, and asked what was going on. He walked us over to the Night Stalker and showed us on the monitor where it looked like 4 or 5 people were milling about near and inside of the first line of concertina wire. We didn't need any convincing and asked for the order. We came up with a plan to move to the area on foot to try and surprise the culprits and possibly catch a few in the act. Our first shift quick reaction force had actually done something similar and caught a young teen in the act a few weeks before, so it seemed the logical thing to do. We went back to our trucks, gathered our soldiers, and checked our weapons, locking around in the chamber and making sure they were all safe, and moved around to the perimeter road. Once in the ditch on the backside of the road, we laid out the plan. I took 2 soldiers across the road to the ditch on the other side, and the corporal took his 2 soldiers down the other side to a predetermined bend in the road where we would link up and continue with our plan. The reason for splitting up that way was just precaution and to ensure a proper amount of distance between our group, in case we actually were faced with a hostile force trying to make their attack. This wasn't too far-fetched, as NATO was at war with Serbia, and the Serbs didn't particularly care for us, and had threatened attacks against NATO forces in Bosnia to draw us into the war. Needless to say, we were on edge, yet ready to meet whatever we faced and do our job. When we arrived at the bend in the road, the corporal and his group crossed over to our side of the road under our cover and linked up with us. We set the next course of action, which called for my group slipping through the concertina wire at an attachment point connected to a post, and the corporal group continuing up the ditch, thus ensuring we could cover each other and take the flank away from whoever was coming through the wire. We came up on Tower 5 and had about 100 to 200 meters left to cover at this point, after we uncooked the wire and slipped outside the perimeter of our camp and reattached the wire. We made contact with Guard Base in Tower 6 to make sure our culprits were still around, and after confirmation from Night Stalker and one of the guards in the tower wearing night vision that the 5 intruders were still there and that the tower and Night Stalker could see us, we continued with our mission. What happened next is mind-boggling, and there is absolutely no explanation for it. After covering about 75 meters, we heard the tower call the guard base and say that the culprits are gone. Tower 6, guard base, what do you mean they're gone? Over. Guard base, Tower 6, it's like they disappeared and they're not there anymore. Over. Pretty soon, Guard Base contacted us. Warrior Quick Reaction Force 1 and 2, did you copy that last transmission? Over. Guard Base, Warrior Quick Reaction Force 1, roger, over. I give the same response. Guard Base told us he was en route to our location with a few trucks to investigate, and to proceed on foot and link up at Tower 6. As he was transmitting his instructions to us, I could hear what appeared to be Night Stalker, I assume, conversing with one of his soldiers and saying, "Dude, they ain't there anymore." Now keep in mind, everyone but us had eyes on the target, culprits, whatever, and told us before we started that they were indeed there inside the fence line. Now they're not there anymore, they just disappeared. And myself and my team are outside the wire with things that just disappear without warning. One of my guys was visibly freaked out. as was I and the other soldier, but I had to calm him down and tell him I needed him right now and to keep his eyes open. By this time, about 5 or 6 Humvees passed us on the road and were closing on Tower 6. We maintained radio contact with the corporal and his team on the PRC 126 handheld radios for inter-squad communication. We didn't have much ground to cover, so we decided to maintain sight with each other, and we bounded toward the tower, covering each other just in case someone was waiting for us inside the tree line outside our perimeter. Soon we were at the tower, and we had to find an entry point where we could detach a section of wire and get back inside. We had to move down another 50 meters or so away from the tower to gain entry. The tower guards and everyone else who had gathered at the tower, including myself and one of my soldiers, faced out and trained our weapons on the tree line while the other soldier opened the wire, and we made our way back inside the perimeter. After reattaching the wire, we made our way over to the tower to see what the hell happened. The whole time we maintained cover while the wire was being opened to go back in. I was beyond spooked and on edge, waiting any minute to be shot, and not having night vision. I could swear that every little shadow inside the tree line was a Serb waiting to blow me and my guys away. We ran to that tower. The hell with taking it slow at this point. If we were fired on, we had our guys covering our route and we could take cover in either ditch alongside the perimeter road. When we got to the tower, I said, "What the fuck do they mean they just disappeared? Are we dealing with freaking, not the word I used, ghosts now?" The commander of the guard said, "We were monitoring them the whole time and they just vanished. No trace, just gone." Unbelievable. Of course, the lieutenant was in contact with the Night Stalker and still no sign. By now we had a pretty good show, as everyone who was something on that camp was there. The event had hunter-killer teams of Apache Longbow and Kiowa warriors in the air circling the base to search for our ghosts. Everyone was a little bit spooked by this time, and I have no idea what time it was, but I was just ready to get back to the Quick Reaction Force tent and watch a movie or play PlayStation, anything to get away from that freaky circus that was taking place. After about an hour or so, we were released back to get our vehicles and head back to the tent. We took some good-natured ribbing when we got back to the tent from the guys who stayed back to man the radio, and the commander of our Quick Reaction Force, Staff Sergeant Vanilla. We were met with, "You guys see any ghosts?" And, "Heard you guys almost shot up Casper and his family, that's messed up. Casper is friendly and never did anything to you." Now, that's just a clean version of the jokes we heard. But we all know what we saw. The whole situation was spooky, and when we were relieved by the noon to midnight shift and took more ribbing, the corporal and I, he was one of my roommates, decided to go to the cappuccino shop and try and make sense of what went down. We went back to our room after and stayed up telling the story over and over to the small audience of our other roommates and a group of others from our battery wanting to know what happened. I ended up going to sleep around 1900 or so that night and got only about 4 hours before I had to shower and get ready for the next shift. We did a few patrols that night in the Humvees around the perimeter, and Night Stalker was set up somewhere else around the camp to continue looking, but no one reported anything that night like that, or for the rest of our time there for that matter. I have no idea what it was everyone saw. Maybe it was a malfunction in the equipment from Night Stalker and the night vision goggles in the tower. Could be, but that's one hell of a coincidence for 2 separate pieces of equipment to malfunction at the same time. It is the Army though, so it's possible. Were they ghosts that just happened to make their presence known to a roughly company-sized element of soldiers? Might be. There was one night I was walking back from the front gate to my room. The other guys went to our chow hall that operated 24 hours, and I passed what I thought was a civilian worker on her way out to the front gate to go home. However, all the civilians we had working at camp checked out at 2100 hours, and this was a little after 400 in the morning. Anyways, I smiled and said hello, and she returned my greeting. When it registered that I'd never seen her before, and the time I turned around and she was gone. Couldn't have been but a few seconds unless she jumped into the bushes, but I would have heard that. She was pretty and looked very real. But she disappeared and never saw her or any other strange occurrences again. I'd heard some of our tower guards and gate guards say they've seen people that were there one minute and gone the next, but chalked it all up to boredom and just being in a strange place. Anyways, we had asked if anyone found anything out a few days later, and of course nothing. Night Stalker's camera didn't record as it operated, just provided real-time night vision. Bosnia was one of the cooler, stranger, and fun experiences I've had. I kind of missed the place and the people I met. I was able to visit Sarajevo, Makarska, Croatia, which is one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen, visit a refugee camp, and deliver toys to the children who lived there. I met one of the sweetest little girls at that camp. She clung to me for the 2 or 3 hours we spent there. I heard a lot of stories, some good, some sad and depressing, and some just downright bad from our interpreters who were at the gates with us and accompanied us on presence patrols. They all experienced the brutality of the war firsthand. A couple were women, a few years older than me, who would make me origami birds and give me flowers. I think of them often and hope they have a better life now because of our presence there. I can't explain, nor do I think anyone can explain who was there, what we saw that night. Given what happened in that war, I wouldn't be surprised to have someone tell me they were spirits that hadn't moved on. Like I said in my other story, I'm not sure what I believe in when it comes to paranormal things, yet at the same time, I would never knock anyone who does. I hope whoever reads this long experience can offer an opinion to what we saw that night. Some research I've done on that area didn't reveal much as to what happened there during the war. All I know is that our camp used to be a part of Tuzla Air Base during the years of the former Yugoslavia, and we were in an area that had a Muslim majority. I can't find any instances of any battles, but I do know something had to have happened in the vicinity, because there were houses that bore the brunt of war.
I believe you. Weird lights in woods and mountainous areas are extremely common, OP. I live in a rural area of southern Europe, and you just kind of get used to weird shit like this. Everyone that lives around these parts has a weird experience to share. Here's mine. My father has a farm that's around 1 kilometer away from our house. You need to go down a road that has woods on both sides to get there. We usually go by car, but in the summer I like to go by foot. One time I was making my way to the farm on foot, alone. I was 14 years old. Clear summer day, great weather. I remember reaching a clearing just before you get into the final stretch of road that leads into the farm. I look up to the sky. I see 3 bright circular lights with a red aura around them just above the farm ahead. They are slowly moving from left to right, almost as if they were scanning the farm. They suddenly disappear, like a fade-out effect on a video. Almost like it turned on a cloaking device. This whole experience lasted 3 minutes at most. I was scared, and for some reason my instinct was not to move. For some reason I felt like if I moved, the lights were going to come towards me. As soon as they disappear, I run towards the farm, because my dad is there alone and I'm scared something might have happened to him. I get there, and Dad's okay, a little shaken up like me. Says he also saw the lights. Dad has a rifle with a scope at the farm and says he looked down the scope towards the lights. His description is literally the same as mine, but he adds that when he scoped in to see them closer, he could see a weird texture around the red aura of these lights. He said it seemed like the sky around them was melting, like they were bending reality. This is my only real experience and what led me to become a believer of the paranormal. There's weird shit out there.
It was a hot summer night in my town, near Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina. I was alone at my home. My dad, sister, and mom went to Ostrog, a monastery holy place in Montenegro. So I invited some of my friends and a few girls, just enough to have a small house party. I don't want to talk to you about the party or my family being away from home, so I'm just going to skip to the interesting part. After all of my friends were gone, I cleaned some of my house and went to bed, turned on the TV and watched some boring show. I felt like I was falling asleep, so I turned the TV off and closed my eyes. After a good half an hour of turning and twisting in my bed, I heard a noise coming from the direction of my TV. I wasn't surprised nor scared. TVs do make some weird sounds, so I didn't even think about it. After 2 minutes, the closet, which is approximately 3 feet away from my bed, made such a sharp and clean sound that I immediately jumped out of my bed and turned the lights on, expecting someone would jump out of the closet and slit my throat, but nothing happened. I stared at the closet for 3 minutes, trying to encourage myself to open the closet door, which I did, and there was nothing in the closet aside from my clothes. I felt like I was going insane. I even sat on my bed holding my arms on my ears and questioning myself, am I going insane? Because that closet did make a really sharp sound, like someone or something was scraping really strong and sharp nails inside of it. After 20 minutes of questioning and encouraging myself, I turned my lights off and went back to bed. I managed to fall asleep after only 5 minutes, but that didn't last long. I woke up, covered, or should I say floating, in sweat, shaking and with such a fear inside of me that I have never experienced before in my whole life. I looked at my closet and I swear there were 2 green dots, something like cat's eyes in dark, in my closet. The closet doors were open and there were no clothes, just 2 light green dots standing still. The next thing I remember is me waking up, the sun was up, and I felt pretty good. The closet doors were closed and I just thought it must have been a dream. The next few days I had trouble sleeping. There were no sounds, but I was so afraid to sleep in my own room. But after a few days it was all over and my life continued normally. To this day, I am still not sure if all that was just a dream, or there really was something in my room. You have my word, I have not made this up. Everything that I wrote here is truly what happened, or what I really believe it happened, because I am still not sure if this was all just a dream or my imagination.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.